All right, we're going to talk about evolution. Evolution explains how living things change over time, and it also explains how so many new species arise. A lot of times when people talk about evolution, they talk about the tree of life. So if you picture this tree here, imagine the very first life being the base of the tree, the very first organism, the very first thing that was considered alive. From that one bit of life arose all that we see today, all the different branches of life and all these different species. What evolution does is it explains how all of these different species could arise from the first life. Now, what evolution does not do is tell us where life came from. We still don't know where that first life came from as far as evolution. That does not explain that. That is where religion can come in or other theories. So what I'm trying to say is evolution does not take the place of religion and they can coexist. I know that's been a problem for many people, but it doesn't need to be. Evolution simply explains how all of the different types of organisms and variability and all those different species and branches of this tree could come from just the first life. Okay, so what is a species? A species is a group of living organisms, this is the definition from your textbook, consisting of similar individuals capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding. That's a mouthful. What does that mean? A species is really just organisms that live in a similar or live close to each other and are able to breed. So they're able to have babies. And those babies are able to have babies. So they have viable offspring. They have babies that are capable of producing babies. As long as they can interbreed, they are considered the same species. Where did all of these species come from? That's what we're going to talk about when we look at what is evolution. I also want to look at how do we know that the theory of evolution is true? Where's the evidence? We're going to look at a whole lot of evidence in this chapter for evolution. And actually on Wednesday, for your next section, then we will discuss more details in evolution and how evolution occurs. But let's look at the history first. Okay, so throughout history, people have always pondered, where did all of this life come from? How did all of these different organisms come to be? And there's been many theories along the way. Some of those ideas were proven wrong, and some of those ideas were on the right track. Let's go through some of those. So Lamarck, you might have heard about Lamarck before. Lamarck became kind of a laughingstock in this field later in life, but at first he was on the right track. He was the first biologist to propose evolution and link diversity with environmental adaptation. So he linked the fact that different organisms were suited for different environments. And he also concluded that more complex organisms are descended from less complex organisms. So organisms become more complex as they adjust to their environment. And that's all good. But then he proposed that the inheritance of acquired characteristics was possible, meaning that this giraffe over here, these two giraffes, let's say they really want to eat those leaves on that tree. And so they stretch their necks and they keep stretching their necks. And over a long period of time of wanting those leaves and stretching their necks towards them, then they became longer necks and that they could then pass those down to their kids. Now, this is definitely not the truth. If it were, then let's say your parents worked out in the gym and then they had you, you would be born with a lot of muscles from your parents working out in the gym. And as much as we wish that was true, it is not true. So actually that theory is called Lamarckianism, and it was definitely laughed upon. Then you have Cuvier. He was the founder of paleontology. So he was finding fossils and he was linking that, hey, there's all these organisms, traces of these organisms and evidence of these organisms that aren't around today. What happened to them? and also looking at those organisms that were on these fossils that he was finding and saying, wow, that looks remarkably like these organisms that we have today, only different. So he's looking at how things have changed over long periods of time. And paleontology is important because until people started looking at fossils, they didn't really have a way to compare organisms over time. Now, some of the other ideas that were around at the same time period that were proven wrong, we have Linnaeus. Linnaeus believed in the fixity of species, meaning a dog as you see it today. And that's not a good example. There's so many examples of dogs. Let's see. Okay, like an elephant as you see it today is always going to look like that no matter what, even thousands of years from now, even in different environments, that elephant will always look like an elephant, and it always has. Thousands of years before and millions of years before, always look like that elephant. Or we could do the same with the dog, actually. You could say that the dog has always looked like your dog, and that it was made that way. So that is actually not true, but Linnaeus did develop taxonomy, meaning he found a way to name all these different species. Genus and species names, they're scientific names. Cuvier, the same one that was the founder of paleontology, proposed something called catastrophism. And this is where he said local catastrophes in the past had caused Earth's strata to have a new mix of fossils. Meaning the reason he was finding different fossils, he thought, was because some big catastrophe came along and killed all those animals at once. All those life forms at once. And after each catastrophe, the region was repopulated by species from surrounding areas. He's over here trying to explain all these fossils he's finding. The theory of catastrophism was proven false, but he was trying to think of ways to reconcile what he's finding with the views at the time. The views at the time were that all species were created, it was creationism, and all species were created by a God exactly as they are seen today, and they were never look different, and they never will change. No change. They were fixed. But that's not what they were seeing with their eyes. When they looked at the fossils, they were seeing differences. And when they looked at different organisms compared over time, they were seeing that things did change. So they were trying to find ways to fit in both of their theories. When in fact, all of these were proven wrong. Let's look at the evidence for this. We're going to talk more about Darwin in a little bit, and I want to make sure that you watch the video that I posted the link to. I know it's a pretty long video, it's about 30 minutes long, but it is a good one to look at for Darwin and the theory of evolution. Because I don't have the time to go over that completely right now. But if you watch that video, it will cover everything as well. But what I do want to go through real quickly are the different forms of evidence for evolution. One of them is biogeography. Biogeography, so the geography of life, where life is found, the regions life is found. And what Darwin noticed, and several other naturalists also, was that similar species are found in similar habitats. So he reasoned that related species could be modified according to the environment, and that the environment had to do with what species looked like. Living forms could be descended from extinct forms known only from the fossil record as well, because he looked at fossils and living organisms. Here's some examples of what he's talking about. So this is a sugar glider. It's a tree dweller, and you know what? It resembles the flying squirrel. They look similar. So they live in similar environments and have similar adaptations, but live in different parts of the world. The Australian wombat, right here, it's nocturnal and lives in burrows, and it resembles the woodchuck. So they live in different areas, but have similar habitats, and they have similar features as well. This is the Tasmanian wolf, which is now extinct, but it was a carnivore that resembled the American wolf. Again, evolved in different areas of the world, but in similar environments. And there's some more examples over here as well that they also go through in the videos. Okay, another piece of evidence is fossil evidence. They were finding all kinds of fossils. And these fossils it got hard for some of these fossils to put them into a category. So there's a fossil right here, and it kind of has little leg bones. It has similar neck and vertebrae. It has it says expanded ribs, but it also has some fins and some tails like this fish. So it's a fossil that seems to be like in between an early amphibian and a fish. They didn't know what category to put this in. And that's because this right here is a transitional fossil. They're fossils that are a common ancestor for two different groups of organisms, and they allow us to trace the descent of organisms. So it shows us that this fish actually evolved into an early amphibian tetrapod. So the fins of this fish over time were selected, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but some of these fish were born with longer fins. And then they had babies that were born with longer fins, and they had longer fins. And eventually those fins they could use them to push around on the ground. And they eventually turned into legs. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later, but that's evidence for evolution. These transitional fossils. Over here you can see this is a land mammal, has 4 legs. And we found out that land mammals actually turned into whales. And one of the videos I have posted the link for you guys to watch describes this evolution. So I want you guys to look at that video. I don't have much time on these. Look at the video. It's really, really neat. Okay, homologous structures, vestigial structures, and analogous structures. These are all ways to look at anatomy, to see how anatomy can be evidence for evolution. For example, homologous structures, they say that they're anatomically, meaning they're built out of the same thing, because they're inherited from a common ancestor, but they might function differently. For example, here's a bird, and it has the same bones here, the humerus, ulna, here's the key radius, and then you have metacarpals and phalanges. Phalanges are the fingers. They have the same as the bat. The bat also has all of these. So does humans, horses. They actually have fused phalanges. So they do have all the phalanges, they're just fused together. And you can look this up online. You can see pretty good pictures of how they're fused. The cat and the whale all have the exact same bones, just in different functions. So some can fly, and some are flippers, and some walk, and it's just amazing, the variety. Your cat, if you guys have a cat or a dog, they have something called, I think it's called a dew claw, where they have that claw up higher on their leg. That's one of their phalanges. Okay, so those are homologous structures. That's different from analogous structures. Analogous structures, they serve the same function, but they're not constructed the same. So they're not made out of the same parts like homologous structures are. They just do the same thing. And they do not share a common ancestor. They evolve to do similar things, but they're not from the same ancestor. Homologous structures, they are from the same ancestor. For example, this bat can fly using this setup, where a bird has hollow bones and different structure, and bees, they just have these wings and another different structure. I'm not going to be able to get through this, so I'm going to have to make another video, but I want to show you guys what vestigial structures are first. Vestigial structures are fully developed anatomical structures in one group of organism, and their reduced or obsolete function in a similar group. For example, we came from primates. Well, we are a primate, but what you can see is we used to have tail. So we have a leftover tailbone right here. So when people say, oh, did you hurt your tailbone? That is actually a vestigial structure, and it really is a tiny piece that used to be a tail. It's a leftover evolutionary artifact. Same thing for the whale, which you will see in the video that I have a link to. Whales actually have this vestigial structure that's left over from when they evolved from land mammals. They had legs. That's actually back legs. Crazy, mind-blowing. You can actually see all of this evidence. I'm going to make another video for you guys and finish this up.